I do want to acknowledge where we are standing today. We're standing today on ancient land. We're standing today in this place that we call Mokinstis, the elbow. It's a place where for thousands of years people have lived and loved and hunted and fished and met and traded, where people have tasted great victories and felt bitter disappointment. It's the home of the Nitsitapi, the people. We call them the Blackfoot people. It is a home that is shared by the Beaver people of the Tsuut'ina Nation, the Nakota peoples of the Stoney Nation. It's a place where we walk together in the footprints of the Métis people. We are not on new land, newly populated. We are on ancient land. We are an ancient land, and in this time of reconciliation, I think it's important for us to remember that. And it's important for us to remember one other thing, and that is in 1877, just east of here at a place called Blackfoot Crossing, people from different nations came together and they made treaty. They signed something called Treaty Number 7. And in making treaty, they laid out that this was a place that was welcoming to newcomers. And they laid out how newcomers would share this land with those people already here. And when we welcome newcomers, and when we share this land, we are indeed honoring treaty. And I think that that is an important thing for us to think about as we think about our common future. You can probably guess why I'm focused on welcoming newcomers at this point in history. And odds are I'm going to come back to that relatively quickly. But before I get there, I just want to say thank you very much for having me today. It's a huge honor for me to be here with all these great Canadians doing great things. It's a great honor to be here with Ashley Collingbow, but where is she? I wanted a selfie. See, in my life, usually the subject and object of that sentence are reversed. It's a great honor to be here anyway. And Ryan, I'm happy that you have finally got me out to an Upstream event. We've been trying for a long time. Did you tell them, Ryan, how we met? 6 o'clock in the morning. I have to catch an unbelievably early morning flight. I'm in Saskatoon, which already is bad. And then it's 6 o'clock in the morning, and I have to catch an early morning flight, and this loudmouth guy is sitting next to me in the airport thing, and he's just kind of a jerk. And so I'm very polite to him at 6 o'clock in the morning, and I finally dispatch him. And then this guy with this beautiful baby who'd been sitting opposite watching this entire thing came up and said hello to me and said, "You did a good job with that crazy guy." I'm interested in politics, and that is how I know Ryan. How old's the baby now? 4. Oh my gosh, okay. So, I am happy to be here with all of you today, and I'm happy to spend some time talking with you about social determinants of health, and more important, talking to you about community and how building strong community allows us to be able to be more successful in building healthy communities and in helping people be healthy. So I said I wanted to tell you about my day. I've had a pretty big day. I started this morning at a public forum for us to talk about the community response to the Syrian refugee crisis at the John Dutton Theatre at the Calgary Public Library. And I got to tell you, when I went to the public forum, I wasn't exactly sure what to expect. As you know, there's been a lot of discussion around who we are as a people, who we are as a community, how we respond to this refugee crisis. And I wasn't sure who's going to show up at this forum, what kind of discussion we're going to have, how it's all really going to go. And I got there, and the room was packed, and it's 9 o'clock on a work day, on a weekday morning, and the room was packed with people who work hard in the nonprofit sector. It was packed with people who came with their friends and family from their synagogue or their temple or their gurdwara or their church or their masjid or their mandir. There were grandmothers in the room. There were kids who probably should have been in school. And every one of them had a burning question about our response to the refugees. It's a question that we have heard over and over and over again. It's not the question you think it is. It's not the question that Premier Wall asked. It's the most common question we've heard about the Syrian refugees, and that question is, how can I help? What can I do? It was hard not to be inspired by the hundreds and hundreds of people who were simply there asking themselves that question and asking one another that question. There was a moment when a woman stood up and said, I'm a First Nations woman, and I've got a problem. And I thought, oh boy. She's going to ask a very legitimate question. She's going to ask the question, how can we be focused on helping these refugees when we've got so many problems at home, particularly in my own communities? How about we start on those first? And I said, well, what's your problem? And she said, well, I've been meeting with elders and with young people from the First Nations community, and we have an idea, but we don't know what to do. And I said, what's the idea? And she said, we want to make sure that for every refugee family that arrives here, when they get here on the plane or on a bus, we want to make sure that they're greeted by an elder in drums, and we want to make sure that we welcome them to this land properly. That's who we are. It's who we are as a community. It's who we are as people. And that's why it is so important for us to have these conversations around that esoteric phrase, the social determinants of health. I'd rather have the conversation around a different esoteric phrase, around building community, around who we are as community. I want to be a little more specific, and I'd like to spend the few minutes I've got with you today talking about a core issue in our community, and that, of course, is the issue of poverty and how we think about poverty in our community. Regardless of the economic downturn we find ourselves in, regardless of the fact that many of our neighbors are going through a lot of pain right now, we still have to address the fact that we live in one of the most prosperous places on earth. Why is it, therefore, that living in this most prosperous place on earth, we still need to talk about poverty? Why is it, therefore, that we still need to talk about issues of people who don't have enough? Issues of people who don't have enough to fully participate in our community. If you talk to people, and there are many of you in the room here today, who are focused on anti-poverty initiatives, you will hear amazing things. You'll hear great stories of the impact we've had on individuals and on families and on people's lives. But the truth remains that in more than a generation, we've hardly moved the dial on poverty in our society. Child poverty in particular remains exceptionally high. So what do we do? What do we do? I was first elected mayor 5 years ago. 5 years ago. Who said it feels like 10? Because my hair is so much grayer and or missing than it was. No, 10 years will be the middle of the 4th term. So, with that, 5 years ago, and one of the first things I did in 2010 is I really wanted to pull together all the right people in Calgary to talk about poverty. We'd never had a community-wide poverty reduction strategy before. And I pulled together this steering committee, this round table, and the only criteria to be able to sit on the steering committee were you had to be smart and you had to care. And so we pulled together people from diverse backgrounds, from different parts of the community, and I was really looking for them to come up with a big idea. I wanted a big idea like Housing First has been a big idea in dealing with homelessness. A big idea for us to think about poverty, a big idea for us to think about how to change. And I got a lot of pushback. And the pushback was, poverty is too big to have a big idea. It's about money and income. It's about housing. It's a social problem. It's an economic problem. It's a problem of access. But in fact, the Calgary Poverty Reduction Strategy, which is called Enough for All, does contain a big idea. And the big idea is actually a very simple idea. It's a simple idea that I would submit to you is the core of our success in this place, on this land, as a community. And I would submit to you that that core idea, that big idea, has very little to do with the fact that there are carbon atoms in the ground somewhere nearby here that sometimes people pay lots of money for. But it actually has to do with the fact that we here in this community have discovered a very simple truth. A very simple truth that evades too many people in this broken world of ours. And that simple truth is just this: we're all in it together. We're all in it together. And that big idea at the heart of the Calgary Poverty Reduction Strategy is just that. My neighbor's strength is my strength. The success of any one of us is the success of every one of us. And critically, the failure of any one of us is the failure of every one of us. It's a powerful idea. And I'm not saying that it's a left-wing idea or it's a right-wing idea. I'm saying it's a human idea. It's a human idea that helps us understand our commitment to one another and our responsibility to one another to figure out solutions that make us as a whole healthier, that make us as individuals healthier. I really encourage you to read the Enough for All report. It's on Vibrant Community Calgary's website. But when I read it, I see it as addressing three critical parts of the poverty solution: putting people in community first, doing business differently, and collaborating always with the end goal of poverty elimination in mind. By the way, just last night, I was having dinner with the mayor of Edmonton in Edmonton. And the mayor of Edmonton, if you know him, is a brilliant man, wonderful man, a terrific mayor. He talks a lot. And if I say somebody talks a lot, I need you to understand what we're talking about here. It's a quantum leap in talk. And he was pushing me, this is completely tangential, but interesting, I think. He was pushing me on, they're a little bit behind us on their poverty reduction strategy. It's just coming forward now. He only just became the mayor. But it's not a poverty reduction strategy, it's a poverty elimination strategy. And he wanted to get into an esoteric debate about whether we should use the word elimination or the word reduction. Oh, but I was up for it. This was a great victory for me in all the years that I've known him. And we're old friends. We go back way before politics. Just by coincidence, we ended up, well, maybe not so much coincidence, we ended up in this jobs together. But I was ready. And I said to him, Don, it's because a city has income inequity by definition. So if we are helping the people at the bottom, there will always be people who have more than others. So there will always be relative poverty, even if there is not absolute poverty. So our job needs to be on reduction, not elimination, because elimination is a goal you can never meet. It's just math. And he looked at me and he said, that was esoteric even for me. And I felt that was a great victory, that I got him even more esoteric than me. Anyway, the point of all of this, and how much I appreciate how our poverty reduction stuff aligns with the Upstream approach, is it's not just about services for the poor. It's about catching people. It's about building a strong community network to help people not become the poor, and figuring out what we need to do as a community in order to do that. And when we put people in community first, we build personal networks of support. We create opportunities for people to work together to find local solutions. It's about peer support programs. It's about what we call community hubs, which are physical locations where people can go to access services, and you don't have to go to one place if you're having mental illness issue, and another place if you're a senior, and another place if you're a child. The whole idea is we've got these community hubs. And these community hubs sometimes are purpose-built. There's one across the street from City Hall called The Source. And sometimes they live in places where we already have community services. I remember last year I was with the mayor of Edmonton again. He's much on my mind, I guess. And we were at the the annual Librarians Conference, which happens every year in May in Jasper. I have determined I want to go to the Librarians Conference every year for various reasons. Jasper is very beautiful. I'd actually never been there before in my life. I know. It was very cool. We read a book together. You should see it on YouTube. It's really cool. But I said to those librarians, we were talking about this concept of community hubs, and I said, if only there was a place in our community where there were people who really knew how to access information and were really, really good at it, so that if I came, they could quickly size me up and say, here are resources that could be available for you because I know how to find those resources. If only I could think of an existing organization that could do that with people who know how to access information. We found one. So again, our libraries, our recreation centers, and so on are continuing to work as these community hubs. But it also recognizes the role that we play as individuals, that we personally play, as mentors, as volunteers, as advocates, as employers, and how all of us have different ways that we need to think about our own role in reducing poverty in our community. For example, whenever I talk to business organizations, I always encourage them to do two things. The first thing is to go back to their human resources departments and ensure that two dirty words are removed from their hiring criteria. Those two dirty words are Canadian experience, to ensure that new Canadians have an opportunity to actually access work and do well, and work in their own professions. It's about hiring Aboriginal people by design and ensuring that there's an opportunity to do that. It's about identifying jobs that can be done by people with disabilities. It's about allowing flexible employee schedules. It's about going to your procurement departments and ensuring that the way you as a business buy products and services is fostering wealth-creating entrepreneurs in our own community. There are simple things that we can do together. My friends who work on financial empowerment tell me the simplest thing you can do as an employer is to ensure that you're helping every one of your employees have a bank account by paying only by direct deposit. Saves you money, but it also ensures that your employees have access to decent banking services and they're staying out of the clutches of predatory lenders. So these are the sorts of things that we can all do as individuals, as businesses, as employers to make a big difference. And there's a lot that we can do as well as government. I'm really stuck on predatory lenders these days. So we as a council may have heard that we have passed a new land use bylaw to stop the proliferation and concentration of payday lending stores in certain neighborhoods. I'm really proud that City Council did that. The lawyers weren't very happy we did it, but if not us, then who? And we need to continue to advocate for that kind of work. We need to invest in collaboration. I'm a big employer. I got 20,000 colleagues at the City of Calgary. And I got to make sure that within my own organization, we remove unreasonable systemic barriers to hiring and to promotion within our own organization. Financial institutions have a lot to do. Did I mention I'm obsessed with predatory lending at the moment? They can increase access to financial products and savings. They can create asset building products for people. They can provide safe alternatives to the payday loan companies. We've got a wonderful credit union here in Calgary. It says First Calgary Financial, but actually they've just merged and they've just changed their name. Connect First? First Connect? Some terrible name. Anyway. But they are a great, great example of a champion in this area. They've already created short-term loan products to compete with payday lenders in a way that helps people build assets rather than prey upon people. But most important, what we've learned time and time and time again is we need to collaborate in order to succeed. We need to coordinate our efforts because that is the hallmark of our strategy. That's the foundation of our success. Not government, not nonprofits, not individuals, not business, all of us together in the community. Coordination is not always easy. Even coordination within my own organization is not always easy. When I was first elected, one of the things I suggested was that we really were not dealing with people who had low income in a way that helped them preserve their dignity. So if you needed a low-income bus pass, you had to show up with only this specific proof of your income. You had to take it to a particular place. By the way, the proof had to be your last year's tax return. There's a reason for that, right? Because in encouraging people to file their taxes, it made sure that they were on the radar of the system to make sure they were getting their child tax benefit and other benefits that they were available for. But what happens if you're a recently arrived refugee? You don't have last year's tax return. You have to wait a whole year to be able to have access to a low-income bus pass. Well, that doesn't make any sense. And then why is it that having proved myself to Calgary Transit, I then have to go and prove myself to recreation if I want subsidized swim classes for my kids? Or I have to prove myself to parks if I want to rent a park space for my family to have a family barbecue? Simple answer, right? A common intake process. Show your proof once, expand the amount of proof that is available. Oh wait, trust people. And let them do it just once. It's a brilliant idea. It's called fair entry. It works really well. It took us 5 years to actually get there. I might have been a little bit grumpy about that. But the good news is, it works now. It works now. I have no idea how long I was supposed to speak for. I suspect it was not this long. However, was that right, Ryan? Not this long was the answer. But I want to finish where I started with you today. The power of our community. The power that we have as everyday people, using our everyday hands and our everyday voices and our everyday hearts and our everyday souls to make extraordinary change in the world. I don't need to convince any of you in the room that we have to work hard as individuals, as families, and communities to be able to build our community and our neighborhoods, our communities, and our cities. You're here. You spent the day and the evening here. So the question then becomes, how do we use the collective power and resilience and advocacy and voice and hands and hearts in this room, and how do we spread that throughout our community? How do we do it every single day? Now, I wear this number 3 all the time. It stands for a very simple movement called 3 Things for Calgary, encouraging every Calgarian every year to do 3 things for their community. And all of you are looking at me going, dude, 3 things? Since Monday, I've done 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 things. Why are you setting the bar so low? But it really is about encouraging people to answer 2 questions. What am I good at? What do I care about? And the link of the nexus between those questions, the sweet spot between them, is the way that we change community. And those 3 things can be simple things. Shovel your neighbor's walk. They can be big things. Volunteer your time to tutor newly arrived refugees in English. For those of you, by the way, who are interested in shoveling of walks, I mentioned I was in Edmonton yesterday. And when I got back, there's a solid 2 inches of ice on my front walk, so come on over. It's all for the pedestrians. But the point is that together we have that power, we have that ability, we have that strength. I just want to come back, if I may, for just a moment to the conversation I had. I never even told you about the rest of my day. I only started on the Syrian refugees and I kept going. After that, I spent time with 1,000 high school students at James Fowler High School as part of their social justice club, talking about what they can do to change the world. I've just come from an event at something called the Intercultural Dialogue Institute that's talking about how people of different faiths and cultures can come together to build our community. Their simplest idea, by the way, is a dinner club where they invite people from different backgrounds to invite people from different backgrounds for dinner once a year. And it makes a tremendous difference in how we think of one another. I've been in the media a lot today, too. And I have really spent the day trying to talk about our values as a community. And I've suggested, and I think it's true, that these next few weeks and months will be a defining moment for us as a people. If we figure out how we can make sure that the 1,000 new Calgarians that we are going to be welcoming to this place in the upcoming weeks and months have the best possible chance to live that great Canadian life, then we will have succeeded. And this is our opportunity to do that. Whether you're someone with a basement suite that you can rent out for cheap, or if you're a giant landlord who's putting hundreds of units on the market. There's a great story in the paper today. Riaz Mamdani, one of the wealthiest men in Calgary, it was a funny story. He said, I'm putting apartments up ready for these refugees. And the reporters asked him smart questions like, how many? For how long? What's your budget? How much are you going to charge in rent? And his answer was basically, I don't know. People need places, I have places. We'll figure the rest of it out. And the thing that makes that story remarkable, of course, is Riaz is a wonderful man. He's a terrific philanthropist in the city, has been for many, many years. By the way, only a little bit older than me. Did I mention richest? Anyway, the reason that's an extraordinary story is because Riaz came to this country from Uganda in 1972. So he and his family were refugees. And he says, it's not like I have to think about this. This is my duty. I got to do this. There's another political story that's been going around these last few weeks. Maybe you've heard it already, and I don't care what your political stripe is. It's a story that's worth reflecting on. A story about a family in Afghanistan. Father, mother, 3 daughters. Father got kidnapped by the Taliban, never seen again. Presumed killed on the border between Afghanistan and Pakistan. Mother and 3 daughters spent 10 years going between Afghanistan and Iran, looking for charity, looking for people who could take them in, trying to build what life they could. Then they won the lottery. And the lottery they won was they got to come to Canada. And they ended up in a place called Peterborough, Ontario. I spent a summer in Peterborough, Ontario in 1992. I found it to be not exactly the most welcoming place I'd ever been, but they worked hard, single mom, 3 daughters, and 2 weeks ago, the eldest daughter was sworn in as a member of the Canadian cabinet. That's who we are. It's who we are as a people. And that's why having these discussions about how we build community and the impact that building community has on people's health are so very important. So the challenge for all of you today is the secret 4th thing of the 3 things for Calgary. It's top secret, but I'm going to tell you now. By the way, it's not exactly top secret because I talk about it all the bloody time. The 4th thing is this. Don't be shy. Talk about your service. Talk about it widely. Talk about it proudly. Talk about the difference it makes in people's lives. More important, talk about the joy that it brings you. And use that story to inspire others. Use that story to inspire your neighbors and your friends and your families and your kids to do their own 3 things. Use that story to tell your neighbors and your coworkers when the conversation is getting uncomfortable, when, as it has for the last 4 or 5 months, it's suddenly okay to say stuff it wasn't okay to say 7 or 8 months ago. Use your story to say that's not okay. And use your story to say that's not the values that we are building our community on. And use your story to light the fire in others, to do their own 3 things, and their own 3 times 3 times 3 times 3 things. Because I can stand here all day and talk about technical solutions to poverty. I can stand here all day and talk about how we're addressing homelessness in our community. But ultimately, the solution comes from that. It comes from every single one of us using that everyday voice, those everyday hands, and that everyday heart to make extraordinary change in the community. And I know that every one of you are up for it. Thank you very much.